everyone, and welcome to this video going over your Chapter 2 quiz study guide. So let's get started talking about converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Given the conditional statement, if AM equals MB, then M is the midpoint of AB. I'm going to label my P and my Q. My P is what goes after the if, it's the hypothesis. And the Q is what goes after the then, it is my conclusion. To write the converse, I flip the order. So I'm going to say if M is the midpoint of AB, then AM equals AB. If M is the midpoint of AB, then AM equals MB. This is true, because if M is the midpoint, it splits AB in half, and so AM would equal MB. If you need to draw this out, imagine A and B are the endpoints of my segment, and M is in the middle. So AM would equal MB. And the original statement is true as well. If AM equals MB, that must mean that M is in the middle. That must mean that M is the midpoint. Now let's write the inverse. To write the inverse, I keep the order of the original the same. So I am going to do blue and then red. But for the inverse, I negate. So I'm going to do the opposite of what it says. So if AM does not equal MB, then M is not the midpoint of AB. If AM does not equal MB, and the not equal is just a slash through the equal sign, then M is not the midpoint of AB. And this is true. If those two sides are not equal, then M is not the midpoint. And lastly, to write the contrapositive, I'm going to switch the order and negate. So I'm going to do red and then blue, and I'm going to do the opposite of what it says. If M is not the midpoint of AB, then AM does not equal MB. This is true. If M is not the midpoint, that means the other two sides of M are not equal. In part D, it says, can the biconditional be written? Why or why not? If possible, write the biconditional. The biconditional can be written because both the original statement and the converse were true. And in order to write the biconditional, we use the fancy words if and only if in the middle of P and Q. So I'm going to say AM equals MB. If and only if. M is the midpoint of AB. So I drop the if and the then, and I put if and only if in the middle of P and Q. And this can only be written if the original and the converse are true. Next, in number 2, it says determine the next two terms of the sequence using what kind of reasoning? Well, if we're looking at patterns and making a generalization, that is using inductive reasoning. So I go from 3 to -6 to 12 to -24. It looks like I'm doubling, and since I'm alternating between positive and negative, I must be multiplying by -2. 3 times -2 is -6. -6 times -2 will be positive 12. 12 times -2 will be -24. -24 times -2 will be a positive 48. And 48 times -2 will be a -96. Next in B, I go from 100 to 50 to 25 to 12.5. And so it looks like I'm dividing by 2 each time. So 12.5 divided by 2 will be 6.25. And 6.25 divided by 2 will be 3.125. Next, we need to determine the difference between inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is when we look at observations or patterns and we make a generalization. Deductive reasoning is using facts and logical reasoning to actually prove that a conjecture is true. So in A, it says if angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles, then angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, which is true because of the vertical angles theorem. If we have vertical angles, then they are congruent. And if angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, then they have the same measure. That's the definition of congruent. This is deductive reasoning. That is a logical pattern to making a conclusion using facts and theorems. Part B, each time your mom goes to the store, she buys milk. So the next time your mom goes to the store, she will buy milk. That is inductive reasoning. We are noticing a pattern of our mom going to the store and buying milk, and we're making a generalization that that will happen again. But we don't know for sure it will happen. It was just based on observations. Inductive reasoning. C, each time you clean your room, you are allowed to go out with your friends. So the next time you clean your room, you will be allowed to go out with your friends. Same thing, that's inductive reasoning. That's recognizing a pattern that every time you clean your room, you can go out with your friends and making a generalization that that will happen again. Inductive reasoning. In D, rational numbers can be written as fractions. That is true. Irrational numbers cannot be written as fractions. That is also true. So 1/2 is a rational number because it's a fraction. That's deductive reasoning. That is using facts and using them in a logical sequence to make a conclusion. That is deductive reasoning. And so hopefully with those examples, you understand the difference and will be able to do that on your quiz. In 4, it says complete the following algebraic proof. Given -3 times 2x plus 4 equals 24, prove that x is equal to -6. So I'm going to start with my given equation. And the first thing I want to do is distribute. So I'm going to multiply the -3 into my parentheses. And I get -6x minus 12 equals 24. That was the distributive property. Next, to get x by itself, I want to add 12 to both sides, which will leave me with -6x is equal to 36. And I got that by adding 12 to both sides. And then to get x by itself, I need to divide by -6, which will get me my proof statement, x equals -6. And I got this by dividing -6 to both sides. So that is an algebraic proof. We are given an equation and we're solving it with our algebra skills. Now I want you to try a geometry proof. So we start with our givens, that angle A and angle B are supplementary. That was one of our givens. Because angle A and angle B are supplementary, that means that their measures add up to 180. That's the definition of supplementary. Next, it wants me to state my other given. It was given to me that angle A is a right angle. And then they say that the measure of angle A is 90 degrees. That's because we just said it was a right angle. That's the definition of a right angle. Next, they want me to use the substitution property. So look for a value that I can plug into an equation. Well, I had this equation up here in statement 2, And I know that the measure of angle A is 90 degrees. So I can go ahead and plug in this 90 for the measure of angle A. So I'm going to say 90 degrees plus the measure of angle B is equal to 180 degrees. I substituted that value in for the measure of angle A. Then I solved for the measure of angle B by subtracting 90 to both sides. And remember, I am trying to prove that angle B is a right angle. Well, since I proved that the measure of angle B is 90 degrees, that must mean that B is a right angle because that's the definition of a right angle, an angle measuring 90 degrees. The last thing we are going to review in this video is our angle pairs. For question 6, we have two parallel lines, M and N, and a transversal that cuts through them. And we're going to talk about our angle pairs. Provide two pairs of corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are on the same side of the transversal and they point in the same direction, such as 1 and 5. Those are both on the same side of the transversal and point in the same direction. And we also have 4 and 8. Both 4 and 8 are on the same side of the transversal and they both point downwards. Next it says provide two pairs of vertical angles. Vertical angles are the angles that are on either side of each other when we have two intersecting lines. For example, 2 and 4. And 1 and 3. Then provide two pairs of same side interior angles. Same side interior angles are on the same side of the transversal and both in between the parallel lines. So here are my parallel lines here. So this is my interior. Notice how 4 and 5 are on the same side of the transversal, and so are 3 and 6. Then provide two pairs of alternate interior angles. So I'm still looking in the interior, but now I'm looking at the diagonal, such as 3 and 5, and 4 and 6. Now that we know what our angle pairs look like, let's talk about their relationship. So for E, it said if angle 2 is 10x minus 5, and angle 4 is 105 degrees, how can we find x? Well, 2 and 4 are vertical angles, and I know that vertical angles are congruent. So I'm going to say that 10x minus 5 equals 105 and solve. I'm going to start by adding 5 to both sides, which gets me 10x is equal to 110. And if I divide by 10 to both sides, I get that x is equal to 11. Next it says angle 3 is x plus 16. And angle 6 measures x plus 76. 3 and 6 are same side interior angles, which means they are supplementary. So I'm going to add up these measures and set them equal to 180 degrees. I'm going to start by combining my like terms. X and x makes 2x. 116 plus 76 makes 192. Then I'm going to subtract 192 to both sides and get 2x is equal to negative 12. And then I'm going to divide by 2 to both sides, and I get that x is equal to negative 6. And lastly, it says that the measure of angle 3 is negative 6 plus 18x. And that the measure of angle 5 is 120 degrees. Angle 3 and angle 5 are alternate interior angles, which means they're congruent. So I'm going to say -6 plus 18x equals 120 and solve. I'll start by adding 6 to both sides. And I get 18x is equal to 126. And 126 divided by 18 gives me x equals 7. So make sure that you know all of those different angle pairs and what they look like, and also how they're related so you can set up equations to solve for x. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in class.